Come on over and sit down.
Come. Come.
Here.
Are we all in?
Yes.
Oh, it's wide
Dave, you're
angle?
going to be the loudest.
Ah, very
Because Dave is
good.
right next to the microphone.
Uh,
Let's see, what is today's date? The
The
30th.
30th, yes.
The
Wow.
2030th,
And the year is 1988.
That's right.
1988.
This is,
August 30th, 1988.
and this is Agnes's first visit to our house, and so we
Her
wanted
first
to...
interview.
Yes, and it's her first interview. We wanted to welcome you and ask you some questions about Miyakawa history.
Well, fine. Whatever I can answer, I will be
Okay.
glad to.
Do you know when your parents came from Japan?
No, I really don't know.
Before you were born, right?
Yes, oh yes.
No
I was
way.
born in Sacramento, California.
Davey, don't.
So they were there before that, you see.
Yeah.
Davey.
So I really
Do you
don't.
know if they went to school? Did they come when they were starting, when they first got married, or did they meet each other
Oh,
in
my
California?
father was already a teacher. He taught, I think, high school.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he taught mathematics and astronomy and chemistry.
I didn't know that.
Oh,
He taught
yes.
when he was in Japan?
Oh, yes, uh-huh.
And then,
And then he decided that he would like to come to America, and like so many people, probably he thought it was very easy living, you know. And he came over, and so many of the people became farmers.
oh,
And of course, his family was a farming family, but he had never farmed. He was brought up to be a school teacher.
mm-hmm.
So when he started to farm in California, it was not for him. So
Did
then he decided to go to learn.
pharmacy, right?
Yes, and so having had physics also. So having had that sort of background, he applied for examination for pharmacy,
Mm-hmm.
and which he passed. And
Did he have to go to school for that? And then he took the exam, or do you know if he went to college here? Is that?
I don't think
did
so. His the whole idea, though, I think he did mention that he came over thinking that he would go to college,
Oh, I see.
but then English was very difficult,
Oh.
and living had to be made, and his family, of course, was in Japan,
Uh-huh.
and so in order for my mother to come over, he had to
Oh,
change
so
plans.
he was married when he was in Japan,
Oh, yes, uh-huh.
but he had no children yet.
Yes, he had my oldest brother,
Oh, your oldest brother was born in Japan.
in Japan.
And his name?
June.
Oh, June was the oldest.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
And so June was born in Japan, and then he left. Then your father.
Just came along.
And what was his name? Your father's name?
Tsunesaburo.
Oh, all right.
Oh, that's
Tsunesaburo.
easy. Right?
Can you say that one?
They should have this on the news, you know?
Tsunesaburo.
Tsunesaburo.
I know, and then they're going to have this name printed out. Oops, I made a mistake there. Nope.
And what did they call him for short?
Oh, I have
Certainly.
no idea.
Oh.
I have no idea.
What did you call him? Did you
Did I
did you
call
call
him?
him Dad, or did you call him whatever you said in Japanese?
You know, I don't remember. But he was father, Papa.
Oh, Papa.
Papa.
I
Uh-huh.
see.
Yeah.
And so he left June and your
Yes.
mother in Japan.
Yes, in Japan. And after he sort of established himself as a farmer to start with, my mother came over
Uh-huh.
and brought...
This was in the early 1900s.
Oh, yeah.
How,
Oh,
Because
yes.
you were
how
probably
old
born in
was your...
1911.
11.
Yeah, I was trying to think.
How,
Yeah.
how old was June when your father left? Do you know?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Well, how many years are between June and the second son?
Well, let's see, Kay was, oh, I imagine there were, 4 years or so difference.
So,
And then,
so he started farming. How did he get the money to come over? He saved
I
up his
don't know.
teaching salary, I
Mhm,
guess.
yes, he was a teacher. So.
Uh-huh. And then he came over and he bought a farm, I guess.
Yeah, and it
And
didn't
tried
work
to
out.
grow, what,
Grapes,
oranges?
I suppose.
Grapes.
At that time, everything was grapes.
Yeah, and it didn't work out. So
No.
then he went to school
I
a little.
came to Sacramento, and
Then he took those exams.
you know,
And then he got a job working in someone else's pharmacy.
yeah, but he got his own pharmacy right away.
Oh, he did?
As far as I know,
Yeah.
I really don't know.
Yeah.
And
Because that was a long time before you were
yes,
born,
that's
wasn't it?
right. That's right.
Yeah. And so then, after how long? Couldn't have been too long before he sent for your mother.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know all the details there. I really don't.
And what was
But
your
I know
mother?
that Kay and George, I think, were born over here.
Yeah.
And so was I.
Uh-huh.
But,
What was your mother's name?
but I'll tell you, George, my brothers were born over here, but they were in Japan until my father finally established himself. Because I think George often talked about living in Japan when he was growing up.
Uh-huh.
You know, that's Andy's father.
Yeah.
So he must have been in Japan for some time before my father was able to get the boys over.
Uh-huh.
And then I was born in Sacramento.
Uh-huh.
That much I know.
Yeah. You have your birth certificate,
I
probably.
have everything.
Do you know if you were born in a hospital? Or were you born
I
at home?
don't know where I was born. I really don't, whether I was
Okay.
born in the hospital or at home.
Most people weren't in
Yeah,
those
in
days. They were
those
born
days.
at home.
You know, I have no idea.
I was trying to picture you as a newborn baby. Little tiny Agnes, except did they call you Agnes? What did they call
Oh, no.
you?
My Japanese name was Yoshiko.
Yoshiko.
Yoshiko. And after I had, then my father, of course, established himself and by having a drugstore of his own. And
What was it called?
the drugstore, I think it was Eagle. No, I remember that name.
Yeah.
Yes, Eagle Drugstore.
Can you picture it in your mind what the sign looked like? And the
Well, I
store?
don't know about the sign, but I know that I just recall that he had bought a building, and the downstairs was that is the street,
Yeah.
or street floor was the drugstore. And then I think there were about 2 or 3 stories, you know.
Uh-huh.
And we lived in back of the drugstore, and then he had made a hospital. That's right, a sort of a hospital for Japanese.
Really?
Yeah, because you see, in those days, the Japanese, most of them, well, so was my father, were immigrants,
Mm-hmm.
and they were not very well treated.
Mm-hmm.
And so my father had this building, which he made into a hospital for the Japanese whenever they needed some place to go to. And I even remember the name of a doctor who was apparently very, very kind, Dr. Pearson.
Oh, he was an American doctor.
Oh, yes, and he was the only doctor that my father would, whenever there was a patient,
Uh-huh.
why he would call Dr. Pearson.
Uh-huh.
And he would come and, take care of the
Oh,
patient.
that's wonderful.
Uh-huh. And let's see,
Oh, I'd never heard that.
huh?
I'd never heard that before.
Is
That's-
that so?
That's really wonderful.
No, I think at that time, maybe George and Kay and June also were in Japan yet.
Uh-huh.
And I was there. I remember that place very well because well, I was there.
Mhm.
And,
Do you remember going upstairs and seeing a
oh,
patient?
well,
or-
yeah, it was just like a hotel, you know.
Yeah.
They had rooms where they could stay, and I don't recall too well. But I was going to say, I had to go to school,
Mhm.
that is kindergarten, and there was a Catholic school nearby. And so I started going to the Catholic school. But Yoshiko was a little difficult for the
Mhm.
nuns, you know.
Right.
And one nun was very nice, and she said, you know, of course you must have an American name. And it all because of the feeling, general feeling, you know,
You
for
went
the
to
Japanese. So
be Americanized.
yes. So she said, well, I am Sister Agnes, so I will give you my name. So that's
that's how you got your name.
right. And it's stuck ever since.
And you were 5 years old, I guess. 'Cause
Yes,
you were in
I think
kindergarten.
about that age.
Wow.
Let's see.
Does anyone ever call you Yoshiko anymore?
Well, my friends do. My friends, and of
Mhm.
course my parents always call me Yoshiko.
Uh-huh.
And yes, I have friends who write to me yet and say Yoshiko-san, you know.
Uh-huh. So
So-
when do you remember George coming back?
Just about the time my father had become, well, fairly well established, shall I say. And he was one for education. He felt that education was very important.
Especially being a teacher.
Yeah, yes, he was a teacher.
Right.
So he didn't like the idea of us living in town, and usually it was a Japanese section, a Chinese section, an Italian section, and so on, you know.
Mhm.
And so he bought a house outside of, away from the town, from
Mhm.
the town. And then I remember my brothers all living with
Coming back.
us. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And
Well, you know, I remember Andy or Pop, somebody telling me the story of how when Pop was little, he was adopted into another family because their sons were sick
yes,
with tuberculosis.
yes,
And then this was your mother's family,
Mhm.
the Kawato?
that's true.
Is it Kawato? Is that
Kawata.
Kawata?
Mhm, yes,
That was the other family.
yes,
And then when one of their sons survived the
Yes,
tuberculosis,
uh-huh.
and then at that time they felt free to send George back.
yes, right.
So it was really both of them, George and Kay, went.
George and Kay and my cousin, this cousin, was lived with us too.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes. Well, you see, his parents both died, and it was my mother's sister's son, only son.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's customary in Japan if you have family that well, in that case, the father and mother are both gone, and they just had this one son, you see. And if anything happened to him, the Kawada family would have died out.
Mm-hmm.
So George, being the second or third son, was it?
Mm-hmm.
They said, well, we'll lend you.
Right.
Yeah, right. And that was not because they wanted to get rid of him or anything. It was just the family, the way things were done.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah, there was
because
nothing.
it's important to keep the family name
That's
alive.
right. So,
That's okay. She said that the microphone is on the camera. It's showing,
oh, I see.
and that's all right. We're not really doing a professional studio job here. We're just having a nice little family history lesson. Do you have a question?
Well, when you were in kindergarten,
Mhm.
start calling? Did people call you your Japanese name before you had your American name?
You know, I don't remember too well, and I don't remember having friends in those days.
Really?
Uh-huh. Only I had Japanese friends. But we were pretty well segregated in those days, you know.
Do you remember feeling sadness or
No.
prejudice or anything?
No, nothing like that. I was too young. I don't think that it sank in, you know. But we lived at that time, you see, in the Japanese town section, and they were all Japanese there. So there was no reason to feel. But I will tell you, when we did move out, then it was quite different. But it was all right. It was just my father always said that, well, you have to study hard. Maybe you'll have to study a little more than other people. Yeah. Well.
Are you hearing this, Laura?
So he was a great one for bringing up children. That was his line. And
what type of man was he as a father? Did he ever tell stories to you, or
did he use what?
did he, tuck you in at night?
Oh no, there was nothing like that.
I think that's not the Japanese
No.
way.
But he was very nice to me, of course. But I was a baby, and the only girl, and that makes a difference, if you're the baby of having 3 brothers and then you come along the very end. Why, of course, I was very much spoiled, I'm sure.
Tell me about your mother.
Mom.
Oh yes, she was a lady. She was really a lady. She was a daughter of a very wealthy man. He was not, in Japan they'd have families. They'd say this family was 400 years old, or this one was, anyway, her family was, I wouldn't say a nouveau riche, but something like that. And so she was brought up on all these very fine training, sewing and playing the shamisen and learning how to cook and playing the koto, you know what that is? It's a long instrument.
I've heard it.
Sit down and play. And then they lived in a place called Tsuyama, which is...
So that was your mother's family?
Yes.
What about your father's family? Did he live in Tsuyama also?
No, yeah, but he lived about 20 or 30, 20 minutes away from Tsuyama. And his family was the one that was so old, you see.
Oh, it's the Miyakawa family.
Miyakawa family is
so old.
has a very old history. And
but they weren't as rich.
no,
as
they were farmers.
Kurata family.
Yeah. And they had a lot of property, though. In those days, apparently, from what my father has told me, his grandfather was one of the samurais.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yes, was one of the samurais to Mori. I don't remember really. I think he said something like that. Anyway, there was Moriko. How would that be the translation? Well, anyway, there were 2 brothers. The Miyakawa family had two brothers. And when they reached the retirement age, shall we say, this lord gave them a lot of property all around there. It was amazing when I heard about it. But now it's just sort of shrunk
They probably gave a little to this son and a little to this son,
and then
sold
they
a little
needed
here.
money, and they sold this and sold that. But there were some mountains, the lumber mountains that were still there. And so my father married this girl from Tsuyama. And my mother told me that, in fact, I remember there was no girls' school, high school in Tsuyama. So every semester they would have a rickshaw. And I think there were about two or three people who accompanied her. She sat in the carriage, and they, from Tsuyama to Kyoto.
Oh my goodness, to Kyoto?
Yeah, Kyoto was the closest. Well, apparently there was
That's a
something in
long way.
Okayama, but
Okayama
that
was much closer.
Yeah, but that was not as nice as the school in Kyoto. So they would take her over there, and then when it became vacation time, they would come and bring her back. But every time she went, she said it was customary for the Japanese when they go on a long trip and they think, well, maybe they won't come back, something might happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd have a little ceremony, and they would have a little wine, and they'd exchange wine before they go. And she said every time she went,
it's like saying goodbye forever.
Yeah,
and then
just in
what
case.
a nice surprise! I take that.
Just in case.
Hello again.
Right. But isn't that interesting? In those days, they just.
It is. And you said that a couple of people went along with her. Were
yeah.
those her maids or her runners?
The runners, the
They
guiding,
took turns pulling the
pulling
rickshaw.
the rickshaw.
You know about the rickshaw? It's a man who runs. He pulls the wagon behind him. It's not like having a horse. You have a man running. And if it's a long journey, one man can't run that far, so they have 3 men, and they take turns. They rest. 2 of them ride.
In those days.
When you came to America,
When I came to America?
did you still eat rice all the time, or did you change your diet? Did you never really eat rice a lot?
Oh, we ate a lot of rice, but honey, I was born in America.
Okay.
So, but we ate rice just the way you eat bread, you know.
In other words, a lot.
Right.
Did you have it for lunch?
Rice?
Uh-huh.
Oh, sure.
And for breakfast, what did you have when you were a child?
I think we had bread, you know, toasted.
More of American
Yes.
breakfast.
And then for your birthday, did you celebrate birthdays?
I don't remember as a child. No, I don't think my parents were that. I suppose if we were in Japan, they would have had thought of doing that because they would have more leisure. But everybody was working so hard.
What was your mother doing?
My mother was a good housewife.
Oh,
Because you see, there were the 3 boys. Well, 4. My cousin was there, you see, the one.
Oh, and what was his name?
Taro. Kawata, you know.
Taro Kawata.
Mhm. 4 boys and me. So they were really very busy making a living.
Uh-huh.
I remember my father used to leave the house. I don't recall exactly what time, but he used to go, and then my mother, in the afternoons, she used to go, and I used to stand by the window and cry and cry.
Where would she go? To help him at the
To
store?
help him, help my father.
Oh, I see. So she did work in the store also.
Oh, yes. And if there was anything to be done, you know, she was right there. Oh, yes, she worked very hard.
And did she work sort of as a nurse if the hospital upstairs needed
Oh,
someone?
no, I don't think so. I don't think that. I know one time, though, the cook was gone and she had to do the cooking.
Ah.
And, you know, I don't think she ever did the nursing, but I remember that she had to do the cooking for the hospital.
That would be a big job.
Hmm?
That would be a big job, like cooking
Yes,
for
well,
more than just your family.
that's true.
And
That's true.
so what types of things did you have for dinner?
Well, she was very good. When she, as I recall, she used to go to take cooking lessons. You know, there was a lady, a German lady who would teach my mother how to cook American style.
Oh,
So we ate a lot of, well, just ordinary, just stews and
Yeah.
things like that.
what about meatloaf? I remember your father, or not your father, your brother, George, hated meatloaf.
Well, then maybe she, I don't remember, but maybe that she had to do that too.
So after kindergarten, and then you moved to the house outside
Yeah,
the town.
right. Mhm.
And then what type of school did you go to?
To the public school. Went to the public school, and
Did your brothers go with you, or did
oh
they walk
yeah,
to school with
no,
you?
they all. We were very. I know George and I were. We were always trying to beat each other. You know, going to school.
Really?
Oh yeah, we all had bicycles,
Uh-huh.
and we'd all pedaled. Of course, you see now George and I were close, but the other boys were a little older, and I don't know what how George felt about the others, but I know that George and I were always trying to beat each other. If we go to
So you had a
school,
lot of competition
Yeah.
between you.
but we never said anything. you know.
Uh-huh.
And we'd come home from school, and I'd pedal away, and I'd get home, and I'd think, I think I beat him today, or something,
Uh-huh.
or he beat me.
Yeah.
But that was always
That's
just
funny.
within yourself. And yes,
What about in your studies? Did you compete that way also?
no, because he was above me. No, we had no competition that way. It was just going
Just
going back and
bicycling.
bicycle.
Speed.
Yeah.
A race.
Hmm.
And then
Did you have 10 speeds then?
a 10-speed bicycle?
Oh no.
Was it hilly?
And I
where you
used to
had ride?
skate to school
Oh,
too.
yeah?
Oh yeah,
That would be fun.
yeah. We were within distance, you know. I can walk too.
Right.
I know there were times when I walked to school, and I remember there would be vacant lots, and I'd walk through the weeds.
Uh-huh. How did you carry your books?
Oh, like so.
Did you have a strap? You
No,
wrapped them in a
no.
strap, and you just
I
carried them in
I
your
don't
arm?
think we had too much homework.
Oh.
I
don't
don't.
recall
Speaking
that.
of homework,
I don't recall.
you could do it right here, Laura.
I gotta get it.
Okay.
Oh dear.
Laura's in the 4th grade.
But I will say this, there were days when I'd be coming home from school. There was always this bad feeling. And coming home from school, if I were walking, I would look on the block, and if there were children playing on the street, I would take a long way home, just to avoid that, because I was afraid.
Of the American children.
Yeah.
Did you speak English fluently?
Oh, yeah.
And at home you spoke English, or at home you still spoke
No,
Japanese?
at home we spoke Japanese most of the time.
But at school,
Well, thank God, because otherwise,
you wouldn't know it.
no, it
Yeah.
was very good.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. It's very good. I wish that we had more language. I wonder why Pop didn't teach the children Japanese.
Well, in those days, they were trying very hard to be Americanized. And so, rather than to go to a Japanese school, they had Japanese school in town, and many of them, after they finished their American schooling,
Then
they would have to go to the Japanese school.
Right.
Whereas we lived out of the town, so after school it was supposed to be like the rest of us. But of course I had friends in our own neighborhood. But let's see, you'll be interested to know that my next door neighbor was a Jewish couple.
Oh, yes.
And they never associated with anybody, but they were there. Like, he had some kind of business, I don't know, we never knew. Then the next door to them was an Italian couple.
Wow.
And, they had, so many children, so we became good friends there.
Uh-huh.
And then across the street was another Italian family. And let's see, right across the street from us, there were no children there. Then just about a block away was a family, Thelma Bone, I think that's her name. And the parents were the father was a mailman.
Ah.
Yeah, but the mother was very shy and very exclusive, I would say.
Uh-huh.
And when Thelma would play with us, she had to get home at a certain time, and
Or she'd be in big trouble, right?
yeah.
The mother was very strict.
So that's good. And then my brothers used to have a German family that they had 2 or 3 boys.
Uh-huh.
My oldest brother, and I don't know, George didn't have too many friends in the neighborhood. I don't know, but he may have, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what my background is.
What about your parents in discipline? Were they strict like Thelma's family?
No, but
But you all were well behaved.
yeah,
right?
I don't think we had any problem.
Did you ever do anything wrong that you can remember? Or that might be one of the questions
I
you don't
think
want to answer. Did you ever get spanked?
Oh, when I was a little girl, before that, when we lived in town, I used to.
Yes.
I used to wet myself. And yes, I used to get spanked for that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And but that's about the only time.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
I would forget, and I'd run around and
Yeah.
forget to
Oh,
go.
I know. I taught first grade. Lots of kids do that. Just get so busy playing.
Yeah.
So then, was your mother, who would talk to you if you needed disciplining? Was your father the one, the way it is in so many American homes?
No, I think it was my mother. One time, I don't know what the reason was, but my brothers had done something. I really don't know. And this little mother of mine, she just lined them up.
Yes.
And she gave them a talking to. And I really don't have the least idea what it was. She went right down the line. She just gave them all a good slap.
On their cheeks?
Uh-huh.
I wonder what they had
That's
done.
the first time that I ever saw that.
She was really angry, wasn't
yes,
she?
I
Did she
think
raise
so.
her voice when she got angry, or just?
Gee, I don't remember that part, but I was surprised
Did
because
she-
she just gave them all 4 of them a good slap in the face.
Oh, that's
I
funny.
guess they were pretty surprised too.
Was she shorter than they were?
Oh, like me.
And they were older. Right?
Yes, they were naturally a little taller than I know
Yeah.
anyway. But that was a surprise for me because I'd never seen that.
Mm-hmm. And what time would your father get home from the store?
Oh, usually around 10 o'clock at night.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, it was a long day,
My goodness.
you know.
That is a long day.
They had to work hard in those days.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
Then, of course, after a while, things became easier.
Did he hire other employees then?
Yeah, my father's brother and his wife came over, and so my father gave him the drugstore and the building so that my uncle could take care of everything, of that part, and that he could stand on his own feet.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meanwhile, my father built another bought another piece of property and built another rather large building. And let's see, that was two-story high. But this one, he really made it into a hospital. Had a surgery department, and all
Really?
that. Yeah, oh yeah. And he named it Agnes Hospital.
Did he really? And that's in Sacramento.
Oh yes. And
was it closer to your home, or in the
no,
suburbs
this was
part, or still
just
downtown?
outside of the regular Japanese. Of course, it more or less catered to the Japanese, you
Right.
understand? Yeah. And I remember he was always thinking about the children. And this building was quite large. And I remember there were 1, 2, 3, and four stores. And he rented 1, 2, the third was the drugstore, the main drugstore, his. And then this section, he not donated, but yeah, more or less, to the young people, because the young Japanese students had no place to gather. And so he made this into what they call a students' club. I remember the name now. And so the Japanese kids, instead of being on the streets, would come here.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
Oh yeah, he
And
was
they had
quite a
games
guy.
to play,
Yeah.
and things to do,
We used
music.
to have dancing there, and really, he thought a lot about young people, and we would have meetings there, and it was very nice. Well, anyway, that's the story of the Agnes Hospital, anyway.
My goodness, and on the upper level was the Agnes Hospital.
Yeah, 2 stories.
Wow. And they did surgery.
Yes, yeah.
I bet Andy's father, growing up in that environment, of course wanted to become a doctor.
Oh yeah, he had hoped that somebody would, but nobody did.
Well, Pop did.
Oh, yeah.
George did.
Yeah, George, yes, right, George did.
Yeah.
That's right, George did. But then by the time George was there, everything was settled, and people didn't feel as strongly against the Japanese at that time anyway. Maybe
Right.
during the war
Yeah,
it
and
changed
then it switched
again.
back over, I
Yeah.
guess.
But that sort of feeling, I just remember that, I used to avoid groups of children on the streets because I didn't want to get hurt.
They would probably say, call your names and
You know,
things like
Right.
that. Yeah. Do you still ever feel that way?
no.
When you're walking like into a church or something, you don't know people as well.
No,
Do you ever have
I
the
don't
same
pay any
feeling?
attention. I've gotten very callous. And I think that being sort of outwardly myself, and people, when they don't like me, that's too bad. Why?
That's really the way you have to be.
Yeah.
I mean, for everyone, because
Yeah.
everyone will encounter someone who doesn't like them.
Sure.
And you can either be hurt by it,
Yes.
or you can say, well, I guess it's their loss.
I won't let them hurt me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a good way to have built up that self-confidence, really.
Well, yes, but I owe that to the training that I had in my field,
Right.
that I could feel confident, and if they say things that probably might hurt me, well, I'd say, well, okay, I'll bear that in mind, and if I can improve on this particular thing that they're criticizing me for, I'll try. And it never bothered me. But you'd have to be very strong, I think, to be able to do that. If someone criticizes you and you allow them to hurt you, you go under. But if you can take that criticism and say, okay, well, all right, I'll try to do better.
I can see that in George, too. You know, I could see that he was always trying
Uh-huh.
to do better.
Mhm.
You know, work a little harder, do it a little better.
Yeah.
The perfectionist.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great attitude.
Mhm.
So what about, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, but I think we got that from my father
From
and
your
mother,
father.
both.
Oh, and the mother
Yeah,
too.
yeah. She was very strong. One time I felt very sad was, as I said before, she was brought up in a very luxurious way. And when she came to America, she had to work very hard. And then after my father got out of the Japanese town, and we settled outside, why she still had to take care of the boys, you know, and we had a two-story house.
Oh, excuse me. Hello? Yes. Uh-huh. Now I'm speaking again. Hopefully it'll be permanently recorded. Okay, so where were we?
I don't remember. Well,
Oh, you know, I never did get your mother's name.
oh, Haruno.
Haruno.
Mm-hmm.
How do you spell that? H-A-R?
Haruno. Haruno. Spring meadow.
Oh, is that what it means?
Mhm.
Do you know what Yoshiko means?
Yeah, Yoshiko means the character is beautiful child, Yoshi.
Oh.
But there are many Yoshis with different characters. But the one that they used for me was beautiful child.
Oh. What was George's name? Did he have a Japanese name?
Georgie, but I don't know what it means.
It sounds just like George.
Yes, but it's in Japanese. It's Georgie. It's short. It's not George. It's Georgie. And June is June.
June.
Mm-hmm. And K is not K, but it's K.
K.
K-chan. And mine is Yoshiko.
Do they have meanings also?
Yes, they all
K?
have
Yeah,
uh-huh.
K. What
K,
does that mean?
K. No, I don't know.
Oh, you don't know.
It depends on the character that they use.
Oh, I see.
Now Yoshiko has many different characters,
Mhm.
and each one is different. It means different. But mine, the character that they used on mine, means beautiful. Ko means child.
I see. And is it true? Well, tell me what Miyakawa means.
Miyakawa is, Miya is temple, Kawa is river. So you think, well, temple by the river.
Right. That's what I thought it meant. Oh, Andy's all dressed up, so we can go out for dinner. What about in the summers, when you weren't in school? What did you do then?
My father also, and this is something that June and I talked, and June said, you know, when I think about Pop, he did an awful lot for us. And I said, well, yeah, that's true. When summer came, he just took off. He took us, the whole family, my mother and the 3 boys and myself, camping. June, when he was going to high school, he learned how to make a canoe. So we put the canoe on.
He made a canoe?
Oh, he made a canoe.
Oh my goodness.
He made it in his backyard in our backyard.
What was it made of? Was it wooden?
Canvas, oh yes.
Oh, canvas with
wooden frame
boards
and
or-
everything.
yeah.
He learned all that at school, you see. And so we would take a tent and a canoe, and we'd go camping. Lake Tahoe.
Oh.
And in those days, the place, you could just go any old place and pitch a tent, and there you were. They didn't have these gambling joints, you know. So
Las
every
Vegas.
summer we would go camping someplace. Or we'd go to the American River. I don't know how, it's out of town, of course. but we would go camping on the river.
Did everybody fish?
Mm-hmm. Swim, mostly swimming, I remember that.
Yeah.
So,
What about food? Did you bring your food, or?
I guess, I don't remember.
And you slept
I guess
in little...
my poor mother had to work.
Yeah, mothers have a hard time avoiding it, I think, even on vacations.
Right.
And you slept on bedrolls that you had
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
brought with you?
Yes. No, it was really quite nice, but I think that my father was so intent on educating education and trying to become Americans, and that was his goal, I think.
Yeah.
And I think he did a pretty good job.
I think so too. So, what about as you got on into school and you each sort of developed your own talents? You were saying that George played the saxophone.
Yes.
And
Kay played the violin.
Oh, that's right, because you would play the
And
accompaniment to
June
the...
would play the piano. And I remember he memorized to play one song, and that was My Little Margie.
Oh, yeah.
I'm always thinking of you, Margie. You know? And every time there was a party, they'd say, June, play for something for us. And he'd get up, and what would he play? It'd be the same old thing. Oh dear.
Did you each have a turn then, if you had a party to perform?
Well, yes and no. It just depended on the kind of party. But no, I remember whenever there was some church program or something, Kay would have to get up and play the violin, and
so
I would play.
You did play it in public then?
Well, at church.
Yeah, that's public.
Yeah, right. But George, he played in a band. And so the group, whenever there was a dance or something, the boys got together and played.
Playing the saxophone. It's hard for me to picture him.
Don't you have a picture of him? He's like this, you know, with a saxophone.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
The jazz man, right? And
gee, I wonder if I don't have one. I have to look. If I find it, I'd send it to you. But
there
I
are
don't
probably some in the scrapbooks that we have saved up.
Oh, yes.
But I haven't looked through them. You know, I really need to. That would be interesting. And tell me when you began singing. I guess as a child you sang all the time around the
yes,
house.
I sang always. I remember when I was only 5 or 6, there was a Japanese touring couple came over from Japan, and they came to to Sacramento, and the Japanese were glad, you know, to see them, and they gave us a program. And at that time they wanted somebody to sing. And so there I was. I was about 5 or 6.
Oh my goodness.
And that was my first performance.
It must have been a large crowd.
Well, I don't know. It was just a Japanese community, you know.
Yeah.
So they had a little hall where we all met, and I don't remember how many people. But then after we moved out of the Japanese section, then we all went to the Lutheran church. And there, of course, I always sang whenever there was a program, church program, why I was singing. And then gradually, as time went on, why I joined the choir and sang in the choir.
Do you still sing in the choir?
Not anymore. No, I haven't. You mean in Florida? No,
yeah.
I haven't, because I find that my voice isn't quite right. Sometimes it comes out and sometimes it doesn't. And
so then when did you begin voice training?
Voice training? When I was, I think I was about 11 years old. I mean, that was real training, and no one would take me before that. I really wouldn't have, but I mean, it's not good for a girl In fact, they said you should wait until your voice changes. Well, you know, if you really like something, if you don't have the proper training, you're going to sing anyway.
Right.
So, no, I started training at about 11 years, when I was 11 years old.
And would you go to their homes or
Oh,
did
yes.
they come to yours?
No, no. No, by the time I started, we went to the teacher's house. But I know when June was still taking lessons, the teacher would come to our house.
Mm-hmm. And he was doing piano.
He was taking piano.
And so then in high school, were you in performances?
Oh, yes, once. I think they had the Mikado or something, and 3 little mates from school, aren't we, you know?
Oh, yes.
But that's the only thing that I did when I was going to high school.
So then when you graduated from high school, what did you do?
Well, I took special courses even before I graduated at the Juilliard, not the Juilliard, junior college. Because by then I was beginning to get awfully tired of school. I wanted to quit so fast. And so they decided that, well, okay, she really doesn't want to, so why not go in that direction? So I took a course in Italian, because most of the singing would be in Italian. And then my teacher, singing teacher, was of French descent, and she taught me a lot of French songs. So a little over 6 months I did that. Then I went abroad.
And how did you do that? You just went?
Well, by then, of course, my father had decided, well, I can't do anything with her anymore. She wants to sing. But I remember by then, 1929, that's when the big depression started to come. And he said, I wanted to wait a little more. I wanted to finish school and all that. And he said, no, if you want to go to Europe, you've got to go now, or I won't be able to send you money. He was a sharp man, you know. He had an idea that the depression was going to be terrible. And so he said, but if you're there, I'll do anything to send you money. So that's what it was. But then he said, now you know, Paris is full of artists, no good artists. So your mother will have to go with you. So June and Kay were still in Harvard. And George was in medical school in California. And here, Mother and I were in Europe. Really.
How did he afford all of that?
Well, he couldn't probably.
1929.
He just did everything he could. And so when we got back, he was in New York to meet us. He was so jaundiced. He was just like that color. I was shocked when I saw him. And of course, by then he just was ready to give up anything, and he wanted to go back to Japan. And so we did.
And how long had you been gone?
2 years in Paris.
Oh, I didn't know that. So you and your mother were gone for 2 years?
2 years, and he sent us a check every month. How he did it, I don't know.
Oh, my goodness. And you studied there?
Oh, of course.
Did you have a special teacher? Maybe your teacher from here recommended someone there?
No, that's another story. I met Mrs. William Jennings Bryan, the widow of William Jennings Bryan. I met her. She was already, very elderly, and she was in a wheelchair. Arthritis was so bad. And I don't know how it happened, but of course she was interested in Japanese people. And I went over. I was asked to sing for her. So I went over and I gave her a short concert. And she liked what she heard, and she said, she asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, well, I want to go to Paris. So she asked if I knew anyone there, and I didn't. So she said, well, Ambassador Herrick is an old friend of ours, and I'll be glad to give you an introduction, which she did. And so I went on, and when we were halfway over there, I think, we heard that he had died.
Oh no! Oh no!
So we went over, and we thought, now what? And I had this introduction to him. So first thing we did was we went to the embassy. Well, the embassy was in an uproar because it was just after he had died. So I got no help from them. No one was interested. They just took my letter and they said, well, thank you, we'll get in touch with you, and that was the end of that. I wish I had hung on to the letter. At least it would have been a nice memory. But I didn't even have that. So then we went to the Japanese embassy. It's convenient, to have both. Well, of course, the Japanese embassy was very nice to us. But they looked at us with a strange look. They said, this immigrant is here. I think they just thought we were just a bunch of nothings, And they asked what I wanted to do, and I said, I wanted to sing, and I knew of the Opera Comique then, and I said, I'd love to sing at the Opera Comique, and they said, my goodness, of all the nerve of the immigrant, because there were other singers from Japan who had been trying very hard to get into the Opera Comique. And one woman was even taking lessons from one of the managers there were two managers of the Opera Comique, and you had to audition for both of them. And if they both said okay, then they accepted you. And anyway, this Madame so-and-so was so well known in Japan, and even she couldn't get into the Opera Comique. Well, how can this child do anything? So of course that made me feel, I'm going to try.
Determined.
Yeah, I was going to do it. And Father said, I can continue to send you money for 2 years. I guess he just figured that that's all he could do. And so I was determined that I should do something during those 2 years, and really did. I took piano lessons, French lessons, and singing lessons, and coaching. And I was very busy from morning till night. French lesson, I went to the Sorbonne and took a course there for mostly Americans. And
had you studied French in school?
yeah, but it was really, very
different.
elementary. And when I went over there, I carried a dictionary, and I'd say, this. And
so did you have your audition?
yeah, at a year and a half, after a year and a half of just intensive study and training, I auditioned. And I was lucky, everything is luck. And
Timing, being in the right place at the right time.
I was just lucky. And it was winter, and the person, I had passed the test, but I wasn't accepted yet. But it was winter, and this woman who was supposed to do Butterfly caught cold, and the manager said, well, why don't we try the Japanese girl? And there I was. They had a Filipino woman, doing it, and of course she said she was Japanese. And it was really interesting what she did, Yeah. So I took over all the butterfly performances. I must have given about 10 performances. And then, well, we just felt that I'd have to leave. And I wasn't getting enough money, you know, to really support myself. And
It again.
okay.
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 Here we go. We left off when you were in Paris and you had the opportunity to sing Madame Butterfly,
Mhm.
and then you returned home. I assume that was on a boat.
Yes, yes.
You traveled by
no one
boat.
flew yet.
It was
Yeah.
1931, I guess.
31, and in the Aquitania, that was one of the famous ships, you know, war ships.
Yeah, I remember hearing
Aquitania,
about
but
it.
that was changed into a passenger.
Uh-huh.
Apparently, it was always a passenger.
And then
I don't know too much about it, but anyway, it had been done over for passengers, and it was very nice. Got back to New York.
And your father looked really sick.
Oh yes, he was. I think I said.
Yeah, jaundice.
He was really very ill.
Yeah.
He didn't show it, but I could tell from his skin the
Do you
color
think
of
that
his.
he had worked too hard, or?
Yes, I think it was just too much for him.
Yeah. And you said that your older two brothers were both at Harvard.
Well, they had finished. The older one had graduated, and then Kay was. I think he was still in law school in California after he got.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So they went
finished
to
in-
undergraduate school at Harvard?
Yes.
And what were they studying? Kay was
Kay
studying?
was law, of course, and June was just what is it?
Business, maybe?
Business. That's right.
And then after June graduated, what did he do?
Well, they all came back to California, and I don't know, he did a number of things, but I think the thing that I remember most was he had to do with the produce. You know, there were many Japanese farmers, and he saw that they were taken care of and sent off to different parts of the United States, and he did a lot of that work. Then, of course, one thing would lead to another, and I think he was sort of an advisor to the Sumitomo Bank for properties, and he was always advising them about what properties and how
Real
to-
estate. He got
Yeah,
into
real
that.
estate, right. And that's it. And then, of course, Kay was still in law school.
Law school.
And then I came back, and of course George was in California, University of California.
Oh, is that where he went for undergraduate?
Yeah.
I see.
Medical school.
It was Iowa, wasn't it?
Well, that was after he finished.
Oh,
his-
that was. That
uh-huh.
was like a
Yeah, he
specialization.
finished his education in California. I think it's Berkeley. University of California, anyway. You know, they have branches
I
all
know,
over the
yeah.
place. And yes, because it was brought to my attention not too long ago. I just said, oh, and George was in Berkeley, and one of Margaret's future son-in-law, we hope, he said, oh, I don't think there's a medical school in Berkeley. And I said, oh, well, no, I don't know. That part of the country is altogether the same, but I know it's the University of California, which is supposed to be tops around there, and it's certainly better than UCLA. And anyway, so I understand that there is a medical school. You don't say Berkeley, I don't think. At least he seemed to think that I was mistaken about that. But so George was there, but when we went back to Japan, he decided he would like to, well, I think he had finished his